put this down before I spill it. I can drink while you're talking. Are we ready?
Yes.
That's not going to stay there.
No, you can take the mic out.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started now on the step part of the program. We're trying to come up with an arrangement where we can sit down and you can still see us. So this is as far as we've gotten. Maybe. And I think the 12-step program gives us a lot of answers without giving us any answers. That is a mouthful. When things are revealed, you really aren't getting answers. When things are removed, you really aren't getting answers. You are having experiences. And then you share those experiences. You don't share information. And so when I look at our literature, for example, we were talking, I think, in the car coming up today. Let's go back to 1942. And, well, not 42. 42. The big book is 2 years old. 3 years old. Thanks. And the people that wrote it are still sober. And let's assume they're all gathered together and they've got a problem and they're trying to figure out the answer. I find it highly unlikely that they turned to each other and said, why don't we look in the book we just wrote and see if the answer's in there? Can you picture them doing that? Why don't we look in the book we just wrote and see if the answer's in there? I would suggest that they probably said, why don't we have a quiet time? Why don't we see if God can inspire us? Why don't we collectively share and see if we can come up with something in that fashion? That's quite different than having a mathematics textbook where when you have a problem, you look in there and get the answer. We don't look in there to get the answer. That book is not to provide us answers. It is to take us on a journey so that we find our own creator. So I've always thought of the big book as a treasure map, and the treasure is God. And it shows you, and your sponsor is the guide who takes us along the journey to have conscious contact with a higher power. That's the point of the whole thing. And as page 164 says, we realize we know but a little. Knowing things isn't the point of it. The point is conscious contact. So it says we know only a little. So if we know only a little and we put it all in this book, the book only contains a little information. So where does all the rest come from? The next sentence, right? God will constantly disclose more to us. That's where the solutions come from. And it's important to understand that we're moving from the material world to the spiritual world, and there's different things happen there. In the material world, problems are solved. In the spiritual world, problems are removed. When they're removed, you don't need a solution because it's not bothering you anymore. And so we have to get used to different ways of seeing things. Our perspective is changed as we move into the spiritual world. And so that, I like to get that, my definition or how I see our literature. It is the map. And if you follow this, bingo, you get the treasure. It's buried right here. And it occurs sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But it always occurs. What always occurs? A spiritual awakening. What does a spiritual awakening look like? You suddenly realize God's doing for you what you couldn't do for yourselves. You suddenly go, oh, holy cow, this is all God acting in my life. You were just contacted. You just had this awareness that the spiritual life is not a theory, it's real. Up until then, God was a word. Other people talked about it and had experience with it. For us in the beginning, it's just a word. A 3-letter word that rhymes with odd, God. Because AA is not a religion. Therefore, there's no definition of God. It is a word that we use, and we really ought to have somewhere in AA, not a definition of the word, but we ought to have something where it says, this is how it is used. This word is used to describe something. What does it describe? An experience. And the experience is called a spiritual awakening. And when you have a spiritual awakening, you generally say to yourself, so this is the God they're all talking about. You see the difference? God was just explained to you in that experience. That's so different from a religion where it's all explained ahead of time. Here's the history of it, Muhammad, whatever, Moses. And these explanations are given so you know all about God, but you have no experience with God. So we really go for the jackpot. A personal transformation, conscious contact, and it is the experience that one has with one's own creator that becomes your understanding of God. And it's different than the person next to you, even though it could be the same God. The experience that you have. That, I think it's important to get that out of the way in the beginning, that there is no AA God. But there's a word that we use here, and we have a treasure map, we have a guide, we have a series of steps that are designed to take you into that experience so that you can share that experience with the next person. And the reason that they want to follow you is the spiritual awakening causes a different energy to be in the person, and we are attracted to that energy. And we want what they have. We don't even know what it is that we want, but I want, this sponsor that I have, I don't know. Things don't bother him. He does this and that. So we suddenly are saying, if you want what we have, if you didn't want what we have, you wouldn't ask us to help you. So we're attracted to something. We don't even know what it is yet. But what we're really attracted to is the answer to the core problem that every human being starts with, which is, there's something wrong. I'm not complete yet. There's something missing in me. Some call it a big hole. There's a void. There's something missing, and I want to go out and fix this sense that something's missing. And the material world said, it's money, baby. If you get enough of it, that feeling will go away. And some people earn a lot, and they report it doesn't go away. It's still there. They should have read the warning label on money. It says, in God we trust. Don't be using me to try and fix that problem. So anyway, I'm just taking this time to make sure that we all start at the same spot. in what we're trying to accomplish with spirituality and the overall dynamics of what is happening. It looks like we're drunks and we're trying to get sober. But if you have a sponsor like I have, this not drinking is just the beginning. He had about 120 other things that I had to change. It wasn't going to stop with just not drinking. Is how you stay alive long enough to get the job done. And then we begin the journey through the steps. And you can see they are taking us on a journey inward, not out going anywhere. They're taking us on this great journey from our head to our heart. And Bob's going to tell us how that happened.
I may never let you start again. I'm Bob. I'm an alcoholic. I think sometimes, what I love listening to Sandy is I think, especially the last 5 years, I've always loved listening to Sandy. He's just further down the road than I am, and yet I'm on the same road, and not that far behind, but it is wonderful as a fellow traveler to kind of sit and listen to his gift of being able to communicate. We're supposed to talk a little bit about 1, 2, and 3, and I agree with and like everything that Sandy said. I think sometimes, though, with a couple of guys with over 40 years of sobriety, we just kind of take for granted what we know today as a ground. And we didn't know it when we were a year sober. We didn't know it when we were 6 months sober. We didn't know it when we were 2 years sober. How many people in the room have less than 2 years?
Good.
Terrific. How many I had serious conversations with were doctors and psychiatrists, and I had never had a chance, and maybe some priests. And I found myself, it was really an extraordinary experience for me to have these people help me examine whether or not I had the problem of alcoholism. And they time and time again said, you have a disease. And the evidence of the disease is when you drink, you can't control the amount that you drink, and you can't stay quit. And that was my experience. And so, they introduced this idea of being powerless over alcohol, and my life was unmanageable. I had no difficulty with that. I didn't understand the depth of it, but I had no difficulty with those words and how it described. And then they recommended that, and I want you to know, though, I had such a resistance and problem. I was raised Catholic. When I found masturbation and alcohol, both of which I really liked, it raised hell with my relationship with the church. So when we got into spiritual conversations, they were very bothersome for me. I could just drive by a church and my blood pressure would go up 10 or 15 points. When the meeting got too spiritual, we split in two. I'd go downstairs. I just wasn't ready for the conversation that were part of what we're going to have this weekend. I was more focused on alcoholism. So when they talked about finding a power greater than myself, and I had the conversation with my sponsor, for me that power was the group and Alcoholics Anonymous, the book, the steps. I had this deep longing and love of God, but I felt like until I straightened my life out, I just couldn't have that conversation. I was not very able to initiate that conversation. And then to turn my will and my life over to that power, I said the words, I did the prayer, got down on my knees, did it with my sponsor, but it still was more the group, and that evolved. I think we see these, sometimes we talk about these steps as if the experience that I might have with the first step, second step, and third step at my initial experience of walking into AA is the same experience I have when I'm sober 6 years. And it wasn't. My experience is that I kept bringing my damp log to the bonfire of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it took, Alcoholics Anonymous initiated a new conversation in my life. A really new conversation. It was a conversation about God. It was a conversation about meaning. It was a conversation about redemption. It was a conversation about how to get my life in order. It was a huge conversation. I had not been having that conversation. I've been the guy that said, I'll go to school, I'll get a degree, I'll go get a job, I'll go get, going to make the money. This was an entirely different conversation. I'm listening to these guys after the meetings talk to their sponsors. They're not talking about drinking. They're talking about I had a fight with my wife. I, got into a contest with my boss, and they go and they're lining up about how to make amends. And I'm sitting down listening to these conversations, and these are not related to alcoholism. I'm sober a week or two, listening. They're talking about life. And then very quickly, I got an idea that what people did with this program and what people did with these steps was that these principles touched every area of their lives. I sponsor a fair number of guys, and I've worked with a lot of people over a long period of time, and I've been shooting my mouth off in AA for a long time. I think that most of us, so one of the conversations we'll be having this weekend is if AA works, why do I still have problems? Well, I don't, but I'm going to talk as if that I do. I came to AA, I quit drinking. Everything's just fine. There's been almost no issue. There was a little time where I thought about killing myself. It was a brief period of time. I find that most of us, when we're in trouble, we go back and tend to start at step 4. We want more information. We want more data. We want more technique. I'm going to attend this conference. I'm going to learn something at the conference. I'm going to study the book. I'm going to get some tips, and I'm going to become more proficient at doing what the book says that I should do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It just doesn't work. Okay. I believe that most of us have serious issues and problems with presencing the first 3 steps in our life on an ongoing basis. That we replace the fundamental idea of powerlessness with information. You can just see us when we're in a meeting, we're in a discussion group, and we're on step 1, 2, and 3. You can just see the person go step 1, load the disc in, punch the button, and they're on automatic. They're spitting out, they're not present. This is their, 3rd step, and they go on that. We all do it. We get on, many of us who've been around for a while and read the book and do the thing, we can do the 2-minute or 3-minute share on whatever the step is, and sometimes it's real for us and sometimes it's not so real for us. But powerlessness, surrender. I remember Chuck Chamberlain was Richard Chamberlain's dad. He was an extraordinary guy. He could see further down the road than almost, he was a very close friend and confidant of Bill Wilson, and he was. When we first came in, the AA talk started with your first drink, ended with your last, especially on the East Coast. Chamberlain, Corrigal, Cheater, there were about a dozen people that started talking about recovery in their AA talks. There weren't too many, and Chamberlain took a lot of crap about being a water walker and all this sort of stuff, and he was highly criticized for start talking about recovery and start talking about spirituality. We are an oral society. Our oral communication evolved. Chuck Chamberlain was one of the main people who evolved that communication in Alcoholics Anonymous. We're now in about the 3rd iteration of that. The 3rd iteration of that, we're now starting to talk about problems in sobriety. That was not discussed much, almost at all. And it is becoming, because people said, I got sober when I'm 15 years old. I got sober when I'm 20. I'm 60. Now what? And people want to have some sort of relative conversation about life in its texture as it exists today, which is a slightly different conversation because the people who gave drunkalogs included that implied in their talk, but you had to know how to listen. And it was there. They took 5 minutes at the end to talk about the wife, family, and job. But recovery, because of how they presenced themselves, was clearly there and intact. They weren't the same people that had that experience, and it was kind of included in the conversation. Chamberlain one time was giving a talk in Atlanta at the Peachtree Conference, where all the experts on alcoholism got together. Conway Hunter put it together. And he's going down there, and he went to give the talk, and I was with him about 3 weeks afterwards, and some guys asked him, how was that conference? Where all the experts on alcoholism gathered, and he didn't talk much at events outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, well, they don't know much about surrender. And in one sentence, he put his finger on what it is. Now, if you wanted someone who was coming over to your house with a bushel basket full of manure that we all have when we walk in the front door or when our pants are on fire and we're really in trouble, and they, okay, say two things to you. What would you want that person to have? Not a tip, not an answer, not a page in the book. You'd want them to surrender. Because if they surrendered, they'd go through the process, the steps that Sandy's talking about that will bring them to the resolution. And Sandy has some tricks that one of the most frustrating and wonderful ones of which is if you brought a problem over to Sandy and talked to him about it, the conversation would probably end up having you realize you did not have a problem. When that wasn't the conversation I wanted a resolution of the circumstances that I wanted to discuss with him. And the nature of it is when you step from your ego and your personal view of life into a spiritual position, the problem doesn't exist. Problem does not exist in that space. And we will have moments in this room with each other where the stuff that we were worried about on the drive over here is just gone. It's just not, it doesn't exist in this space. And it isn't like there aren't circumstances that we have to deal with in life. We do have to deal with them. But if we had to deal with them, the way we would deal with them is, how am I doing in this process? What am I bringing to this process? How am I reacting to this process? What would God have me do in this process? It's a different paradigm entirely. It's like a parallel world. It is so entirely different. And we talk in AA all the time about, you can't solve it at the level of the problem. And yet we spend 90% of our day trying to solve the issues of our lives at the level of the problem. It is only when we step out of the problem that we have that resolution available. So how do you snap your fingers? Because surrender is a spiritual experience. You can't tell someone how to do it. You can't exactly describe someone how to do it. There's a way of bringing yourself to that process. There's a humility and honesty, openness, pain, which reduces the ego enough for the resistance to be gone, so that we're, more available to the right conversation that we would have. And I'm saying to you that, maybe the first time a guy or gal does this 4-step, it's like a third grader bringing their art project home for their mom to put it on the icebox. It's probably a hell of a lot different than a person who's been a pretty good soldier all the way through, who's 15 years sober, who's doing their 4-step. Now, it's all that person needs. You can't do the 4-step of a person. There might be a few people who are old souls, but generally at 3 or 4 months of sobriety, you're not going to do a 4-step that someone might do who's got 6, 7, 8 more years and more experience and some depth in doing that. It is the same form. It is the same step, but there's a deepening in my experience, not every time, but over a period of time, there's a deepening relationship that we have with this process and the God of our understanding, even if we don't necessarily identify it with the God of our own understanding. I was having a relationship with the God of my very own understanding in proxy through you, and not even knowing that I was having the relationship with God. So what I'm trying to say is today, my relationship with those steps is both same and it's different. When I came in, it related more to my alcoholism and the gross unmanageability of my life, and I was focused on trying to take care of those things and improve the circumstances of my life, and I was asking advice about how to accomplish that. Today, my conversations aren't very much about the circumstances in my life. They are a little bit when something's going wrong with the kids or, something's going wrong with business. I mean, I still have those conversations, but it just isn't where my life is at this moment as much as it has been. So I think that ongoingly we would have more effect of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We'd actually do 8 and 9 if we really had the first 3 steps presenced in our lives. We all intellectually know what those steps say. We think we have taken them. But there's a difference between, if we're looking back at the fact that we took them, it's give us this day our daily bread. You can't live on the fact that you took it a year and a half ago. It has to have some validity and energy and aliveness today to presence itself for me to be able to do the work ongoingly that I'm going to have to do to have the full measure that the steps and program offer me over that period of time. At 3 months, you don't need what a person who's got 8 years has. It'd be nice. It's not available. You just don't get it all done in 3 months. You don't get it all done in 1 year. You don't get it all done in 3 years, and I'll report to you, you don't get it all done in 43 years. My observation is it takes about 47. Okay. So what we are is we're all participants and players. We're all bringing our damp logs to the bonfire of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're all entering this conversation, this holy place. In these meetings, there's a collective consciousness. There is something available. It's like we leave part of our minds outside the room and we come in and we plug it into the collective mind that's in rooms like this. And in that collective mind, something very special, there's a healing that takes place. There's a knowing we don't even recognize it. For most newcomers, it's the only peace they have in a day. And maybe they don't even have it the whole time that they're at the meeting. Okay? But the point I'm trying to make is the biggest problem that people have with religion, and one of the biggest problems I see in Alcoholics Anonymous today, is we actually practice the program at the level of ego. What do I know? Who's right? Who's wrong? What's the correct thing? What page is it on? Okay? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? That's a nonsense conversation in a spiritual place. It's a conversation that would happen in a religious place, because dogma and correctness is something that newer and younger people are always interested in. But as time goes on, being right is the booby prize. Trying to get connected to the things that make a difference, that put your hand on the knobs that start to give you access to what Sandy talked about, which is the experience of spirituality. Spirituality is experience, as opposed to belief, dogma, information, or intellect. Spirituality is personal and it's experiential. And one of the reasons that we are so story-based in Alcoholics Anonymous is words can't contain it. So you have to talk around it. But when it's your own experience, there is something about that communication that makes it available to us.
Oh, boy. I was just getting carried away there, and you stopped so quickly. I like the direction that this is going. I really do. It's not just 1, 2, 3, now we'll move on to this step. Surrender, but let me just put it this way. If you asked me, could I summarize the entire AA program in 4 words, it would be let go and let God. That's it. I wouldn't need any more words. Let go and let God. And the reason we don't like that, it's too simple. There's no wiggle room. We need it complicated so we can have an excuse for not doing it. It has to be complicated and complex because I'm a complex person. Some little simple slogan, come on, let go and let God. It's the whole deal. And surrender symbolizes everything, as Bob was talking about. It's the only step we do 100%. And if we don't, we got to go back to it. It'll ruin the whole program if we don't surrender 100%. And so Bill writes, people have been sober for years. And then they realized they didn't completely surrender. They were almost powerless. They're almost as bad as everybody else in the room. They're real close to being a hopeless alcoholic. You know, and nothing happens. It just isn't going to happen. You may be sober, but no transformation is taking place. So surrender is so essential. So then we come to, I'm just going to talk about step 2 and then give it back to Bob. How long do we talk?
Just keep talking.
Oh, okay, keep talking. Okay. So they made us surrender. What made us surrender? Circumstances. That's what made most of us surrender. 4 DWIs, your wife's got the bags packed, the boss says one more time, you're fired. The doctor says, don't buy any long playing records. And you go, well, maybe I better do something about my alcoholism. So it was not an intellectual decision, it was circumstances. And it's pressure, and bam, and now you're in treatment, and now so finally you're here. Yeah, I'm beat. I give up. I surrender. I surrender. So having reduced us to this state of surrender, now they want us to come to believe in a power greater than ourselves. The human ego does not like the thought that there's something greater than me. It does not like that. And so Bill knows this step is going to create a great deal of resistance. Great deal of resistance. That's why there's a whole chapter to the agnostic in the big book, designed brilliantly to overcome the resistance. I've never seen a better written chapter. I'm a big fan of both books, and in the case here, step 2 in the big book is way blows the step 2 in the 12 and 12 out of the water. On the other hand, step 6 and 7 blow the big book out of the water. So this is just me. How can you approach someone who doesn't want to hear about any of this stuff? I did not want to hear about God. I didn't want to hear prayer. I came here. I didn't want any part of that. I wanted to not drink. I'm here. I have to be here. There's nowhere else I can go. I'm not happy, but I'm hanging around. I like going out for coffee afterwards. Some of these people are cool. All right, but this stuff, step 1, okay, but the rest of this is, it's a little spooky. It's a little scary for me. It's a little churchy. It's a little, I've got all these worries about this, and my sponsor saw this because I was not budging after about 4 or 5 months, and I tell this story every time I talk, and he said, let's take a spiritual inventory of you, me. Would you be willing to be brutally honest? I'm going to ask you some questions. I said, okay. He said, how much do you pray? I didn't pray at all. I didn't like prayer, but I never told anybody. So I told him, I don't pray. I think it's stupid. There's no one listening. Wise up. Grow up. That's outdated. So 0 praying. I don't pray. Even when they're doing the Lord's Prayer, I'm going, no. He said, well, at least you're being honest. Okay, 0 praying. Do you ever go to church? Churches are very, no. I had a terrible experience when I was young. Scared the hell out of me. I don't go there even if I'm in Europe. I don't go to the cathedrals. Screw them. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not compromising on that. No, I don't. Okay, how about spiritual reading? There's a New Age section. There's wonderful spiritual. No, I don't. I like mafia books. I like the Nazi books. I like sports. I like all these things. I don't like that. None of that. Never found any comfort in that. Okay, fine. Now, how about meditation? This is a very powerful. Everyone's been doing it for years. It's a very powerful tool. I said, look, I got 6 kids. I'm busy. We got no damn money. I can't sit around just going, yeah. I mean, I don't have time. No meditating, that's out. None. So he went, okay, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. One last question. How's it going? What does it feel like to be inside of you? It's awful. It's terrible. I can't stand it. I'm going to commit suicide. I can't stand myself. I hate everybody. Okay. You are very scientific. Are you willing to conduct an experiment? You just conducted the experiment of 0 spirituality. And you know what the results are. So now I'm trying to get you to try the other side that you don't think is worth the damn, and you get to report the results. Now, how are you going to turn that deal down? Would you be willing to try the rest of this program? So he kind of tricked me into having a slightly open mind. And an open mind is the greatest thing in the world. And when you're sponsoring people, when they get that open mind, they make a noise. It's my favorite noise out of people that I'm sponsoring. And it sounds like this. Okay. You know that noise? They're going to do something that they don't think they should do and don't want any part of, but there's no other where to go. And so they go, okay. And we know that as the sound of willingness. That is the birth of willingness. Okay. I'm going to try something that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't look like it's, and there's nowhere else to go. So look how Bill does that in the wonderful chapter of the agnostic. It's a great, great beginning. Because I forget where he says it, but he said half our number were atheist or agnostic. Half of the people that wrote the big book were atheist or agnostic. We're all coming from this, I've had enough of God, I don't want anything to do with it. We've all had that background, and now we're being pushed in here into a spiritual program. And we're so lucky that it's being conducted by people on the same level with us. There's no high priest. There's nobody in charge. One drunk talking to another. And so we're going to listen to some of this stuff. So he writes, if when you drink you have little control, that's everybody. If when you stop you can't stop, that's everybody. Then you're probably an alcoholic. And if that's the case, quoting the big book, you're suffering from an illness that only a spiritual experience can conquer. What was that again? An official illness that only a spiritual experience can conquer? Is that in the American Medical Association list of diseases under the category of diseases that only a spiritual experience can conquer? Oh yeah, read the doctor's opinion. This is a bizarre illness that I have, isn't it? Yes. That's what you have. A disease that only a spirit. But Bill, I don't like spirituality. Oh, you're screwed. Sorry. Sorry. We don't have a non-spiritual solution to alcoholism. Oh, Jesus. This is worse than I thought. Oh my God. And then he bams us. Then he hits us. You remember the sentence? To be doomed in alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face. And I do this every time we talk about step 2. I go, okay, it's like a quiz program. And I invite you up. You're just a brand new guy. So come on, Al, come on up. Come on up. Al, here's the deal. You've got 3 months. We're playing the game. You want to get sober. And Al, we got 2 doors behind me. You have to choose one. The first one says, die an alcoholic death. Ooh. That's a bad door, Al. Door 2, live on a spiritual basis. What's your choice, Al? If you're a typical 3-month You go, I'm thinking. Because to you, it looks like two crappy choices. Alcoholic death, spiritual basis. Alcoholic death, spiritual basis. Do I get a phone call? Yes, you can have a phone call. I'm going to call my doctor. Hey, Dr. Brown, listen, a friend of mine wants to know, how bad is an alcoholic? Oh, my God. Okay. Door number 1. You see that? Look how we got turned into becoming willing to believe that a power greater than ourselves can fix the situation that we're in. Nobody showed us any sign from on high. No one did anything. They just explained the reality of our own life in very vivid terms. They made us a deal we couldn't turn down. There was nowhere else to go. And so we made that noise. Okay. And that opened our ego just enough for the light to start coming in. The second we made that noise, our life is starting to get transformed. Come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. I came up with my own definition of sanity and insanity. Sanity is God-centered, insanity is self-centered. That's not the official definition anywhere, but that's how I see it. When I'm self-centered, I see everything incorrectly. I think I'm Napoleon. And it looks to me like I am Napoleon. I see everything distorted because I'm not the center. The real center is God. When I become God-centered, sanity returns because I'm seeing everything from the correct perspective. So this second step, the way it's written, I just love the way Bill, that second step in the big book. If you're new, go back and look at it and watch how they cleverly make you willing to reconsider your old ideas about this thing called God. I'm going to now turn it over to the man with all the answers, Bob. Can we take a break?
No, we've got about 15 more minutes and we're done.
Oh.
My experience, I had relatively the same experience that Sandy had talking with the sponsor. It wasn't quite as wonderfully done. But I did, to the best of my ability, surrender and turn my will and my life over to the care of, came to believe that God would restore, power greater than myself would restore me to sanity, and made a decision to turn myself over to that power, which was the program and my sponsor and God. The problem that I had is for about 9 months, I was in a pink cloud. And any question I asked, I got an answer. I'd go up to an old timer, I'd go up to my sponsor, I'd say, I got this issue, I got a question. I'd ask Sandy a question, he'd give me an answer, and it'd be an answer. And when I was sober about a year, I'd go up and ask someone a question like that, and he'd give me an answer, and then I wasn't sure he was right. I'd go to a second person, or I'd go to a third person. My ego started to reassert itself, and my sense of independence started to assert itself. And I started to keep some of the stuff that I had been learning at the level of information, data. And I became significantly self-directed in certain areas of my life. I was telling my sponsor about 65% of what was going on, and I know in New Jersey you tell 100%. But I built some fences around a couple of areas of my life that I didn't want some people messing in. And my idea was, you get me sober, and I'll learn how to do these other things. I'll clean that up. And eventually, and we'll talk about it maybe a little more later, my sense was I can't go to God till I clean my act up. And I'm looking for ways, I'm in charge of this, and I've got to, start doing that. When Sandy said so what brought us to surrender? Circumstances. It's probably as accurate to say that we were surrendered as opposed to that we surrendered. Mm-hmm. We were surrendered. Okay? It was that profound. By becoming more self-directed in my sobriety, I have been surrendered quite a number of times, but in 2 or 3 major ways over the 40 years, I have been surrendered. One of them at 7 years, 7 to 8 years. And what surrendered me? The pain and the circumstances of my life. Some of the things that Sandy's talking about, I think you've got to chase. All of us want to buy a house. We want to make a living. We want to get married. We want to raise kids. We want to have, drive an SUV. We want to, and in order to do that, some stuff's got to change, and we got to get this crap on the road. And we start chasing that thing. And you've got to go through part of that experience to realize the answer's not in that experience. Now, but there's nothing wrong with that, fundamentally with that process if it doesn't own your soul. It's just, I'm a deeply shallow person. I do shallow as well as almost anybody. And I'm a materialist, and I have, I was chasing the dollar, and it was really important to me to be a success, what I thought was a success. But you have to go through some of that thing to reach a point where, I'm climbing the ladder as fast as I know how to climb the ladder to get my life in order, and I think it takes you have to get to a certain age. I don't know if you got to be 30 or 35 years old to find out your ladder's up against the wrong wall. I don't think you know that at 20. I just don't think you do. I don't think your cup's big enough. I think you've got to have enough. You can get hints of it, and if you're an old soul, maybe you can get it. But it took me, I did not really start to realize that. And then you could just get glimpses of it, and you go back, because almost everything we're surrounded with, the wind's blowing 35 miles an hour out there. You need more money, faster cars, younger women, faster horses. That's more. That's all I wanted. I'm not greedy. I just want a little more. How much is enough? Enough. That's a funny word. I want more. I don't want enough. If I got a choice. And as a result of that process, now because I stayed in the program, and because I've always been a step taker, and because I've stayed in the middle and I worked with other people, I've had the opportunity to begrudgingly have to strip my clothes off and look at myself naked in sobriety and look at my life as it then exists. And those have been I've been surrendered at those points where the pain got enough, where my ego was reduced enough that I was willing or able or allowed to stand in the presence of what is, as opposed to what Sandy talked about, life as I perceived it. And I think that is part of the spiritual path. I think that the grace, when we talked about alcoholism being a gift, there's a great Japanese Zen story about the worst horse. We all want to be the best horse. And this great Zen master he had this guy that was, really a rugged, it must have been an alcoholic. And he said, with the best horse, he said, I like you. He said, you're the worst horse. And he said, the best horse, even when you're just trying to think that you want to go to the left, the horse anticipates your ideas and starts to move to the left. A good horse, with the shadow of the whip, does what you want him to do. But the worst horse, you've got to hit him so hard that it sinks into the bone to get that horse to do what he has to do. But when you learn something at that level, and we are a room of the worst horses. We are. We have, I mean, we have defects of character that would bedevil and kill most people. And because we have the density of mind and the busyness of mind and the misperceptions of ourselves and our misperceptions of life, we need something on an ongoing, steady basis for us to have any opportunity to engage in life in a healthy manner. If we don't access that, we're screwed. No, not everybody's the same, and some people are more ordered, and that isn't, it isn't true of everybody, but it's true of a lot of us. And it's true of almost all of us to some degree.
Are we just about, let me just make a few wrap-up things.
Corrections?
No. You may well, if you're new, you may well walk away from this going, I didn't really learn a damn thing about how to do the steps. I was looking for a little outline and to, and take some notes and etc. What I hope you get out of this is you somehow have a vision of what you're going to see when you do finish the steps. And because of that vision, you will work relentlessly to get there. If that happens, then I feel we've done a great job. Because I had no idea where this was going to take me. I thought it was going to get me sober and life would be okay or something like that. Instead, it has taken me and anybody who sticks with it to a place that Bill calls the fourth dimension of existence. It is, we get glimpses, and then we realize it's real, that there really is, and we'll get to this when we get to the 10th step, where it talks about we've entered the world of the Spirit. Now, you can look at that sentence and go, that's cute. I like that. Sounds good. Enter the world. I think I'll tell my wife when I get home, we're going to enter the world of the Spirit. But do you believe it? Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, there's terms throughout all of our literature that seem beyond anyone's reach, and it's in your grasp. It's there. And so it's necessary to use stories to paint pictures because it's the only way to show what this is all about. There is no transfer of information. It is belief that your perspective and your vision can be transformed so that when you open your eyes, you see things differently. And as a result of that, you have peace of mind. Until you see everything differently, it's the same old game. It's the same old game. And Bob pointed out earlier, when we are close to our higher power, problems cannot exist. It's just impossible. That is how powerful that is. And as soon as we move away, they all come back. They're just waiting. Our mind is just waiting to recreate them all. And so what I hope is that if you're new, you'll walk away from this weekend with great anticipation of what is lying ahead, and that it's really going to be spectacular, and that it's not some exercise in futility of filling out an inventory and going back and saying, I'm sorry to 12 jerks. That's not the point of the whole thing. The point is for you to have a personal transformation so that when you open your eyes, you go, whoa, this is some universe God put together. This is amazing. I think the greatest prayer that you can say to God is, wow, this is unbelievable. I don't understand it, but I see it. So you can wrap it up. Are we there? We're done. Thank you for your attention, and we're out of here. Oh, do you want that?